twinning. The dungeon that everyone knows of, whether they play Final Fantasy XIV or not. Why is it that this dungeon is so well known? What makes it the coolest dungeon in the entirety of Final Fantasy XIV? Well, that's what I'm here to discuss. In my personal opinion, it's a combination of the music and all the connections that it has to the rest of the entire game and the entire series. And in this video, I'm going to show you all the connections that are in the Crystal Tower, otherwise known as the twinning. Now, let's start with the music. Alright, so what do we got? Well, first of all, we have the Crystal Tower remixed for this dungeon, and it's from the 24-man raid, Crystal Tower, and it's actually from the original Final Fantasy III. Crystal Tower in that game. So that's one connection. Another connection is that it has connections to Omega, because it has the Alphascape, what is it, V3? The main fight with Omega in the Omega Raid series, it has that remixed in the twinning. And at the end of the dungeon, there's Alexander with his music from his Raid series. Now, let's go back to Omega for a second. What was in Omega? Well, we have Final Fantasy I references with Chaos, and we also have Final Fantasy V references with a bunch of bosses from that, and as well as XIV. And it also has the Final Fantasy VI bosses, even Kefka, which is kind of crazy. But that's already a good handful of Final Fantasy games that this one dungeon is already connected to. But there's still more. It also has the Alexander boss at the end of the dungeon, which is a Final Fantasy IX reference, because there's Alexander in Alexandria. And the reason why you can tell this is a reference is because this Alexander has wings just like the Final Fantasy IX version does. It's a pretty cool reference. Now, what's the last thing that the Omega Raid series has? It has the Interdimensional Rift, which is from Final Fantasy IX. But let's just keep that in our back pocket for a second. For a little bit. Okay, well, what else is in the music? The last thing that's left is the Prelude from Final Fantasy I, which is another Final Fantasy reference. So, what's next? Well, we have the dungeon itself. Where is it? It's in the Crystal Tower on the first. Now, there's a few different references alone with the Crystal Tower. Because first of all, the Crystal Tower is from Final Fantasy III. What else is connected to Final Fantasy III? Xande. Xande is a boss in the endgame of Final Fantasy III, and he's also a boss in the Crystal Tower raid series. And he was the Emperor of Alag. What else is it from? Well, it's also in Final Fantasy Explorers, and it's also in Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Crystal Bearers. Although it's not specifically called the Crystal Tower, it's basically a Crystal Tower. Now, what is the Crystal Tower connected to? Well, the Crystal Tower is connected to the Void, or the 13th Shard. And this is through the portal that you can open during the Crystal Tower raid series. What is what's the Void connected to? Well, the Void is connected to the Cloud of Darkness, which is from Final Fantasy III. But there's also another reference. There's a Cloud of Darkness fight in the Eden raid series, which that's another connection. Which the Eden raid series is connected to Final Fantasy VIII. That's another Final Fantasy game. What else is the Void connected to? Well, the Void was created because of the Ascians. Well, I guess I shouldn't say created, but it was turned into what it is today because of their doing. Now let's keep the Ascians in our back pocket for a little bit. They will come again. Now, all the way back to the Crystal Tower. What else is the Crystal Tower connected to? Well, the Crystal Tower was created by Alag. I don't know how's the pronunciation? Well, what else is connected to Alag? Well, first of all, Rahatia is a descendant of Alag, and he also commands the Crystal Tower, so that's pretty cool. But what else is there? Well, there's Ultima Weapon. What's connected to Ultima Weapon? Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and Diamond weapons, which are a Final Fantasy VII reference. Now, what else is connected to Alag? Well, Dalamud. That's a pretty big one, and that's another Final Fantasy VII reference. Now, what's Dalamud connected to? Well, there's a few. First of all, it's a second moon, which, where have we seen another moon before? Final Fantasy IV. What else is Dalamud connected to? It's also connected to Bahamut, because it was created to house Bahamut inside of it, like a prison. It's Bahamut connected to? Well, it's connected to, well, first of all, it's a dragon, and it's also connected to Midgar Sormer. Now, Midgar Sormer is the keeper of the lake in Mordona, which is where the Crystal Tower lies. And Midgar Sormer is actually loosely connected to Hydaelyn, because it's because of her that he keeps protection of the lake. Now, what else is Bahamut connected to? Well, earlier before I said that he's a dragon. Now, what are dragons connected to? Aziz's Law, because that was basically a prison for dragons, such as Tiamat. And who created Aziz's Law? Alligans, which comes full circle around. Now, what else is Dalamud connected to? Well, the Garlean Empire made it fall. What's the Garlean Empire connected to? Well, they're the ones who created Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald weapon, and also Diamond weapon too. What else is the Garlean Empire connected to? Well, they have Xenos. We don't know this yet, but there's speculation that Xenos is connected to Anima, and Anima is a Final Fantasy X reference. So that's a potential reference. We just don't know for sure yet. What else is the Garlean Empire connected to? Emet-Selch, because Emet-Selch stated that he's actually the founding father of the Empire. So the Empire is connected to Emet-Selch, who in turn himself is Nassian.
If aught threatens the balance twixt light and dark, it falls to you to remove it. citizens or by your armies, you have ample means at your disposal. That is why this empire exists, why I built it. The founding father was an Ascian, and he created the empire solely for the purpose of sowing the seeds of chaos. Don't take it personally. I merely do my duty. To bring about a calamity requires no small amount of power, and there is no surer way to obtain such power than by collecting powerful pawns. To that end, I have labored long and hard, and I must say I am quite pleased with my handiwork, paltry though it seems in comparison to Alag.
It's actually kind of funny, because Emet-Selch is also the emperor of the Alagan Empire. He says this during his time in the Crystal Tower.
But tell me, who are you?
The once great nation whose ingenuity gave birth to this tower was shaped by my hand. As such, I know full well the wonders it can facilitate and those it cannot. There is nothing in these walls which could have aided you in summoning our dear friend across time and space. Much less in possession of his mortal flesh, not even I could have performed such a feat.
I see. You had a hand in Alag as well.
Pretty interesting. This guy led 2 entire nations. That's pretty cool. Which we bring back Ascians now. Who else is an Ascian? Elidibus. And who is Elidibus? The Warrior of Light. He's a well, he turns into a Warrior of Light. And where do you fight him? The Crystal Tower. It all comes full circle. And what else is Elidibus connected to? Well, he's connected to Xenos Yay Galvis, which he's also connected to the Garlean Empire, so it's all a big circle. Now, what else is the Garlean Empire connected to? Well, it's connected to Ivalice, because it tried to take over. What's Ivalice connected to? Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII. Now, here's a fun one. What is Final Fantasy IV? Or no, what is connected to Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy I, and the Interdimensional Rift? What's all those connected to? Well, you'd be surprised. Each one of those things are connected to Gilgamesh. You know, the funny guy from the Hildebrand storyline. So in turn, Hildebrand is connected to the Crystal Tower, which is connected to the twinning. It all comes full circle. The twinning is, in fact, a Hildebrand reference. And also, there's also the fact that Elidibus kind of summoned his Spectre of Light during the Hero's Gauntlet dungeon. So that's another connection to Hildebrand. But yes, Hildebrand, the Gentleman of Light, is actually the reason why the twinning is the coolest dungeon in the entire series. So while editing this video, I kind of forgot about a pretty major thing. I forgot to mention that a big part of why this dungeon is so cool, because it connects to the future that Gratatia is from. The doomed future, I guess you could call it. all throughout the dungeon you can find all these notes from the future of the future Biggs and Wedge, and you can see their journey to traveling inside of the Crystal Tower and transforming it into the time traveling and space traveling tower that it is today. I just thought I should mention it, and yeah, there it is. All the Final Fantasy games that this one dungeon is connected to. Well, there's Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10, 12, and Tactics. It also, well, of course, it references 14 in itself. So, that's a lot. Also, this is a picture of the entire connection sheet I made. You guys can look at it or whatever. I just did this on my spare time and helped me connect all the dots. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe and tell me what you think of it. This is a new kind of video I'm doing. It's kind of fun. Had it in the backlog for a while. And yeah, that's everything. With that, I've been Red the Super Namek, and I'm signing out. So long!